Gab Marcotti into the discussion show, and it's a bit of Sophie's choice for Gab because he loves Ancelotti and he loves Thomas Tuchel, Gab. But let's start with Thomas Tuchel and what PSG need to do. And it's interesting the boys bring up, have they got what it takes to go to Napoli, for example, and play for a draw?
I love Thomas Tuchel so much, in fact, that on Friday night I went to Paris and I watched PSG play against Lille.
Wow.
Where they won 2-1. I think what Buffon was referring to is basic simple math in the fact that they have 4 points, Napoli have 5 points. You can imagine Napoli going to Anfield and losing to Liverpool. That's not out of the question. And if that happens, then obviously the balance of power then potentially shifts to Paris Saint-Germain if they draw this game, and of course, and if they beat Liverpool at home, which they would expect to do. I think that's all he's referring to. You guys make some good points about Paris Saint-Germain. What I will say is, in watching them again in the flesh, this is a very different Paris Saint-Germain right now than what we've seen. Certainly what I saw on Friday night. They were a team that tended to sit a little bit in the first half against Lille, who really packed the box. And then in the second half, they pressed high, they went for the win. It's almost as if somebody has flipped a switch. I think there's more discipline now in the team, especially when it comes to pressing.
Gab, it was only 2 weeks ago they drew against Napoli and were lucky to do so.
Well, I think that's also because Napoli played really, really well in that game. You know, they don't often play teams that play as well as Napoli did on that night. But all I'm saying is that the Paris Saint-Germain right now are not the Paris Saint-Germain that we saw at Anfield. I think they realize that, you know, their season could be over if they screw up this Champions League group, and they do look focused. Now, whether that translates into a result in Naples, especially given the issues with Cavani and whatever else, I honestly don't know. But I'm just telling you, it's a different team, and it was a different team against Napoli as well.
This is a big test of Tuchel, isn't it, really? You know, going in there, Ancelotti's got this side. I mean, he left players out against Empoli and still absolutely wiped the floor with them. He was able to give at least three of them a rest, maybe more. I mean, if PSG just think they can play the open game that they play most of the time in France, I think this Napoli team will pick them apart. So it's whether he can get into the ear of the Neymars and the Mbappes and players like that to say, listen, I understand you want to showcase your talents here. This is a huge game. But at certain points in the game, we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z for the team. Because reputations are on the line here. I mean, you've got Neymar, who got injured in the Champions League last year in the big game against Real Madrid, so we didn't get a chance to assess him in the second leg. You've got Tuchel now, who is taking over there. I know it might be a longer-term project, but it's not going to look good if they don't get out this group, as tough as it is. It's a big game for both Neymar, Mbappe, all these stars, and Thomas Tuchel, because if Liverpool win before them, as I say, there's going to be, and then Napoli beat them, there is going to be a big gap.
Who have you got, Stevie?
I've got Napoli.
You think Napoli are going to win?
I find it very difficult to think that in such a short space of time you've got a front three at PSG who all of a sudden are going to understand about defending, who are going to pick and choose their moments to sit back and defend and do all those things. I just think, particularly Neymar, this is a big game. There's going to be a great crowd. He's going to go, right, you know what, I'm going to show everybody tonight.
Right.
Now, if the guy ends up showing us what he's capable of, then that's possible.
Sure.
But you're not putting money on that. Away from home, what's the odds? So I think the big bright lights might be the thing that undoes PSG with their stars.
To me, after last year, knowing what Napoli did to them then the last time they played, I think the professionalism is going to come out in PSG and understanding what they can do, which is, of course, break any team down, but what they need to do, make sure they stay defensively solid and don't spread themselves out. So that's what I see. I see PSG going through.
This weekend sees the first leg of the Copa Libertadores final, which, of course, sees River Plate take on Boca Juniors. Gab Marcotti, for those who maybe don't know the intensity of the rivalry, can you try and give us an insight?
I mean, this is arguably, I think, together with the Old Firm, perhaps the most intense rivalry in world football. To give you some context, the last time River and Boca faced each other in the Copa Libertadores, you had fans basically boring a hole in the players' tunnel and tossing tear gas in there. These are just two very different realities of Buenos Aires. Boca Juniors from very much a working class area down by the Boca River. River Plate, on the other hand, they play in a stadium called El Monumental in the wealthier northern neighborhoods of the capital. Both these teams really at the top of their game right now in the Copa Libertadores. River's path a little bit more difficult, of course. Plenty of drama and controversy in VAR in the semifinal against Grêmio. Marcelo Gallardo, the manager, suspended for the game, but somehow magically appearing in the dressing room at halftime. I mean, this really is the big one, and probably as exciting on paper a Libertadores final as we've had in a long time. And the last time we're going to get this two-legged format of the final as they're moving to sort of a single game from next season.
Gab, how are they going to handle this? How are they going to handle these rival fans, as you say before? We remember the tear gas incident well. What precautions are going to be taken?
It's tremendous. I mean, on the one hand, we joke about it. On the other hand, if you're in the middle of it, it can be quite terrifying. There was a news story just over the weekend of a Boca fan who got angry with his neighbor who was a River fan, and so he burned down his house. Or it might have been the other way around. It might have been a River fan burning down his Boca fan neighbor's house. I honestly don't remember, but the essence is the same. This really is a very vicious, nasty rivalry. In the case of River, certainly in some ways exacerbated by the fact that they were relegated, of course, just a few years ago, and then came back up. It's going to be a massive logistical effort. It's going to be colorful. It's going to be entertaining. Hopefully, we're going to see the best of what Argentine football has to offer in terms of technical quality, in terms of intensity, and the fans in terms of color. And we'll be talking about that, not about what happens off the pitch.
Thanks, Gab. We'll, of course, be looking ahead to this game in more detail throughout the week. You can join us on ESPN FC daily on ESPN+. Gab, Arsene Wenger to Milan. Any truth in this story?
Well, it's a story that comes from France, from the magazine France Football. Hasn't really been picked up in the Italian media, so France Football writing it very hard that they're in advanced talks. I would find this rather surprising, given that the new chief executive of Milan, Ivan Gazidis, who I believe officially takes over on December 1st, of course, was Wenger's old boss at Arsenal, and the two didn't exactly part ways in a very amicable manner. So, with that in mind, I'd be really shocked if this story were true.
Away from the Gazidis link, Gab, just the general premise of him going over and taking Milan in general. What's your sense of that? Do you like that idea?
I don't think he's what Milan need right now, frankly, because Wenger is somebody who requires a project and requires time. And simply put, Milan don't have much time to work with. They're going to face a financial fair play sanction, and then they're going to have to try to hope for some sort of settlement agreement. They're going to have 2 summers of breaches. They need to get in the top 4 now and play in the Champions League next year. So they're going to have a whole bunch of restrictions. So why this would make sense for Wenger, I'm not really clear.
Alongside Brian McBride to look over this week's player power rankings for ESPN FC. Number 1, Dries Mertens, a hat-trick on Friday for Napoli. And I don't think anyone can have any complaints. He looked good, didn't he?
He did. He had an assist with that too. Deserving a number 1.
It's amazing to think he started the season kind of on the bench. He wasn't a regular as well, but he's certainly found now, Ancelotti, the players he wants in the system that he wants as well.
Yeah, I think anytime a new coach comes in, you're always going to look to see who what type of player fits in your system. Surprisingly, in the beginning, Mertens wasn't, but certainly now very much deserving.
So of these 10, 5 of them play in the Premier League. We're not sure about the whole Marcus Rashford inclusion. We'll get to him in a second. But what about the order of the other Premier League players?
Yeah, you know, I think that Sergio Aguero had an excellent game with a goal and 2 assists. His 150th goal. Alvaro Morata gets his 2 goals, probably should have had 3. Well, he should have had 3. Still looks a little bit off as far as his connecting with his teammates and really understanding his role at Chelsea. But he'll be happy to be there. I thought Raheem Sterling was excellent. New contract and all, just a bright spark throughout the whole game. And Richarlison, 2 goals after scoring a bunch of goals early, now back at it. Hopefully he continues that with Everton.
You're not happy about Rashford?
I'm not. I think Rashford, you know, coming on as a sub, getting his goal, certainly. I still think he has so much more to come. He's not the finished product. I think he misses too many opportunities. 10th, I think there's probably better options out there.
Just a quick word about these two as well. João Mario, Inter look really good. They're at Atalanta next weekend. And Torino, it's just their inconsistency because Belotti is a player. Goal and 2 assists, 2 goals and an assist. For him, 2 key players for their teams. Yeah,
especially with Arcadi getting rested for Inter. I thought Mario was excellent. The big one for me, and the question mark still, I've always had with Timo Werner, is consistency. You know, Germany's still looking for that center forward to score goals. He's scored in 4 games out of the 11, both times scoring twice, so his numbers look okay. Yep. But that consistency that is needed for Germany on the national team side, but also for Red Bull themselves, it's important.
Yeah, Red Bulls go to Glasgow this week to face Celtic, and they warmed up with it with a comfortable victory, courtesy of a double from Timo Werner. So Wayne Rooney's impact at DC United and at MLS, alongside Brian McBride. If you had to write a report card, what grade do you give what he did at DC United?
It was a report card that I never saw. If it was A++, I mean, you got to look at what Wayne Rooney did on the field, but I think even more importantly what he did in the locker room for the DC United team. Certainly winning only 2 games before he comes, 23 goals as you can see here on the stat, -6 in goal differential, and then
what a turnaround.
It's immense, and it's not something you can look at and go, oh, you know, maybe it's because they moved into a new stadium, you know, that additional side of it had a bigger effect. There's no way DC United gets into the playoffs. There's no way that this team turns around if you don't have a player like Wayne Rooney, who steps on the field, not only actually does it in games, but leads it with the way he communicates, the way he works in practice, the way he communicates off the field in the locker room, and to a man, everybody's game was risen.
He loves it in the United States. He has bought into it. You played in MLS for many years. You must have played against players that were just there to pick up a check.
Yeah.
I don't want to name names, but I'm sure we can all surmise who they may be. What message has Wayne Rooney's performance at DC United sent out to the next batch of players that are thinking, you know what, I quite fancy MLS, but I'm not sure?
Well, I think it does 2 things. What it does is for those players that talk about having a desire to finish their career in Major League Soccer, it shows that certainly you can have an impact, but you can have an impact by making sure that you are playing at still a very high level, and your effort and your commitment to the team is at a very high level. What I think it also does is it shows owners that there are players out there that may be on the decline or not having the same kind of impact they did when they were at the prime of their career. Certainly Wayne's not an older player as some of the people talked. They thought he was older because he is mileage. And an owner can now look at it and say, hey, is this player bought in to try and make sure to my team is going to get better? And that means in every aspect. It's not just, result, not just, points-wise and scoring goals and, being out there and looking pretty while doing these things. It's about stepping off the field, leading a group of young players, showing them how to win. And Wayne Rooney's done all of that.
It's been a great signing, not just for DC United, but for MLS. He has bought into it. And for that, everyone at MLS is thankful.
Meanwhile, in Group B, Inter in action against Barcelona, of course. Inter have looked great going into this game, despite the fact they lost at the Camp Nou quite convincingly. Spurs obviously Playing for scraps almost after a terrible run in the group stage so far. Gab, you take a look at Inter take on this Barcelona side. Lionel Messi back in the squad. But for Inter, it should be an interesting challenge.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Barcelona, of course, winning at the weekend, I thought hardly impressive. Really struggled for a lot of the game until that late magic from Dembele and Suarez. We don't know we know Messi's there. We don't know if Messi's going to start. We don't know how fit he is, and obviously it's going to have a big income on the outcome. But from Inter's perspective, they rested Icardi, they rested Vecino, they played a bunch of guys like Dalbert and Gagliardini, who you don't see very often. Raja Nainggolan is back. They feel pretty good about this, and they certainly believe that they can get a result. And given the way the rest of the group is going, I think they might feel that even a draw would be okay.
MLS playoffs are in full swing. Alongside me to discuss, the former MLS striker Brian McBride. Let's take a look first of all at the first leg results from the last few days. First of all, any surprises for you?
No, I think the thing that stands out to me in this situation is how evenly matched these clubs are. Columbus, of course, getting a result against New York Red Bulls, who was fabulous the whole season. Atlanta getting the result away from home at NYCFC is a little bit of a surprise to me, just because NYCFC has had a really strong home season this year, which is against what was happening. And I really look at this and see there was 4 quality matches.
Yep.
And all 4 of them had not only some opportunities for other teams to get goals, but this is going to be a fun rest of the playoffs. Just because I think they're not necessarily that much of a surprise in that they're closely matched, but I think they all provide different problems to each other.
I want to take another look at the full screen, and I want to get your 4 picks to go through from each of the matches, the matchups. Sure. And then after that, you get to pick your overall winner. Let's start. Can the Red Bulls turn it around?
Well, I thought the Red Bulls were probably going to be the team that wins Major League Soccer this year. And seeing the crew play so well against them. And
did it make you proud?
It made me proud, but what it also did, it made me realize that the crew has answers. Greg Berhalter not starting Higuain, bringing him off the bench in the second half, changed the end quality in the final third, but they still were able to get at New York Red Bull during that first half. And I love the fact that this is what I'm talking about. Their teams understand how to beat each other. It's about the execution on the field. And
so, are you going Columbus or are you going the Red Bulls?
That's really hard for me not to go Columbus, especially with the 1-0 result. I'll be true to myself in the sense that I thought Red Bull was going to win MLS Cup. I'll stay with it.
Okay.
But I'd love to see the crew win.
Now, in his first season in charge, our former colleague Gio Savarese has got Portland to a 2-1 advantage against their bitter rivals Seattle. Mm-hmm. Does he hold on, or does Seattle come back?
They looked really good.
They did.
Missing an important part in the center forward position. They still get a 2-1 result. I thought Seattle looked a little less potent in the attack. They served plenty of balls into the penalty area, and they just didn't seem to cause as much problems as you would expect for a club that scored a good amount of goals. That presence, Will Bruin not being in there, of course, I think you have a better player in the sense, but I would have loved to see Will Bruin, and the fact of knowing that those balls were put into some good areas, especially in a small field like Portland's.
NYCFC are not going to turn around a 1-0 home deficit and have to go to Atlanta, or are they?
They're not.
No.
That's a little too much.
Okay, and the final one?
The final one, you look at runs in playoffs, and of course, Real Salt Lake looks to be on a run, similar to how Seattle was and Portland was when they won it, but not for me. I think Kansas City, too much experience in staff and in players, and they pulled that out.
You've gone against Columbus.
No, I haven't.
You have. You said the
my heart has not. I had to stay true to my early on.
Your preseason pick, and he said he didn't make one as well. So your pick for the whole thing is
pre-playoff pick. Okay.
Your pick for the whole thing is the Red Bulls, and they're going to beat Columbus, aren't they? Yes, they are. You said so.
No, I'm going to take it back. No, I can't.
So Wayne Rooney has been called up to the England squad. No, it's not 2010 all over again, Brian McBride. They're playing the US. He's been called up despite retiring. Is it a gimmick?
No, it's not a gimmick. I mean, he's being called up to be recognized. I understand there's a lot of people upset about it. And I think, to me, I look at this and it doesn't matter about how many caps he has, because the additional cap isn't going to break any records or surpass anybody. And I think this is a way that the Federation wanted to actually recognize Wayne Rooney. Comes at a strange time, but I guess the powers that be must have thought that since he did so well in the U.S., he has a great following now here in the U.S., and this is tied in with his foundation for the charity side of things. They decided it was the right time to do it.
You were talking about it doesn't matter because of the number of caps and what he's got and where he's going to go. Let's take a look at the kind of list of England players. If he was on 124 or 125, I'm not sure Peter Shilton would be too happy about this. Is it not the case that we now live in a world that people are grumpy if they don't have anything to be grumpy about?
Listen, I'm not going to go that far. I don't.
Well, you're not grumpy.
There are some people who try and look at things negatively, or are cynics.
Not that we would work with anybody like that or know anybody like that at ESPN FC, of course.
Who's a lovely man, off the camera, and certainly a lovely man on camera. But for me, the bigger issue is, if you're going to look at it from the soccer side of things and really analyze it, the one issue you're going to say is, what about a young player that's not a part of the roster that might miss their opportunity to either step on the field, if it's a certain amount of substitutions, if that part of the game isn't thought through, then you might be hindering some growth. But I have to think that that's all been thought through. You've got a player who, let's face it, he's still at a very, very high level. And so I have no problem with this. I think what it does do is it shows a federation is willing to say thank you to a player who is their leading all-time goal scorer, and who really they didn't get an opportunity to say thank you to. So I'm not going to look at it cynically. To backtrack in the sense that I understand some players might miss out on their opportunity to play, and that I don't enjoy. But I think it's a nice way to say thank you to Wayne Rooney.
Final question. You played at the highest level, but if you were someone that was in a rich vein of form in MLS and you had never won a cap for the United States and you didn't know if you were going to win another cap, and they brought back someone for this game against England at Wembley and it stopped you from getting a cap, how are they feeling?
Yeah, I think those are the type of players that I'm talking about that might miss out on an opportunity like this. But if I'm Gareth Southgate, I've already looked through this process and seen this might be a pitfall and said, wait a second, I have a player that I might need in the future. I'm going to nurture them. I'm going to call them into camp.
You can still play them. It's a friendly. There's plenty of subs.
Exactly. You can put them on at different times. You might not necessarily get them, 25 minutes. You might get them 20 minutes. But still, I think if you think through the whole process, all of that shouldn't happen, which I'm sure Gareth Southgate has.
Yeah. There'll always be people that